I am the son who never found the words before the silence came and made them blurred into the irretrievable, the gone. The things I meant to say, I carried on. Too long, too proud, too certain there was time, too wrapped inside the architecture of my climb, to stop and say the simple, ancient thing that fathers need to hear before the leaving. I learned to love you in the way of men who show their love in doing now and then, in fixing things and working side by side, but never in the words that live inside. You asked me nothing, that was how you were. You gave me everything and asked no sir, no declaration, no returning flood of what you poured so quietly in blood. And now the chair is empty at the board, and everything I meant to say is stored in the place where unsaid words eventually go, the place of all the things you'll never know. I am the son who never found the words before the silence came and made them blur into the irretrievable, the gone. The things I meant to say, I carried on. Too long, too proud, too certain there was time, too wrapped inside the architecture of my climb, to stop and say the simple, ancient thing that fathers need to hear before the leaving. He is the God who holds the unsaid things, who gathers up the grief that silence brings, who knows the love that lived beneath the pride, and sees the son who could not say inside. He does not condemn the tongue that would not move. He does not judge the love that found no groove to flow along. He holds the hidden well of all the things we meant but could not tell. And now I bring the unsaid to his throne, the words that found no home, the love alone that had no language but was real, was true. Lord, tell him what I never knew to say, until the saying was too late. Lord, tell him that I loved him at the gate. I am the son who never found the words before the silence came and made them blur into the irretrievable, the gone. The things I meant to say, I carried on. Too long, too proud, too certain there was time, too wrapped inside the architecture of my climb, to stop and say the simple, ancient thing that fathers need to hear before the leaving. I have watched other sons, younger, at their fathers, who say the word with ease, and this one gathers in my chest a longing and a vow that if I have sons I will say it now. While there is time, while chairs are still occupied, while mornings still begin with someone's side of the table full, I will not wait, I will say the word before it is too late. You are the Father of the things unsaid. You hold the love that lived and went unfed by language, and you know you have always known the love beneath the silence and the stone. And I believe, though reason says it's strange, that somehow in your mercy and your range you carried what I couldn't to his ear, and said your son loved you, did never fear. I am the son who never found the words, but you, oh God, have heard what went unheard. You gathered every silent, aching love and carried it to where he lives above. I am still learning how to speak the thing that lives beneath the doing offering. I am the son still learning. It's not late to say to those still here before the gate. I loved you, Father, in the way I knew, which wasn't perfect, but it was true. And somewhere in the mercy of the King, you know it now, you know everything.
I have tried to stop 1,000 times before. I have stood at the same threshold, the same door, and walked back through it one more time again. The chain is old, and I have worn the chain, but there is one who walked into the darkest hole, who broke the chains that no man's arm could fold. He is the God who finds the addicted soul. He is the mercy that can make me whole. It started as a comfort, as they do, a way to make the wait a little through the days that asked too much and gave too less. A door into a manageable darkness, but doors that open inward rarely close. And what began as comfort grew and grows, until the thing I turned to for relief became the source of everything, the grief. And I am not the man I meant to be. The mirror shows a stranger looking free, but I am not free, I am inside the chain. And I have prayed for God to break the chain. I have tried to stop 1,000 times before. I have stood at the same threshold, the same door,
and walk back through it one more time again. The chain is old, and I have worn the chain, but there is one who walked into the darkest hole, who broke the chains that no man's arm could fold. He is the God who finds the addicted soul. He is the mercy that can make me whole. He does not stand outside the place I go. He does not watch from distance, safe below. The level of my need, he goes the depth. He walks into the shame, he takes my breath of self-destruction, and he does not leave. He is the God who comes to those who grieve their own undoing in the daily fall. He is the God who hears the desperate call. And I have called in voices stripped of pride. I have called from the inside, deep inside, the thing I cannot quit. I've called his name, and he has come. He always, always came. I have tried to stop 1,000 times before. I have stood at the same threshold, the same door, and walked back through it one more time again. The chain is old, and I have worn the chain, but there is one who walked into the darkest hole, who broke the chains that no man's arm could fold. He is the God who finds the addicted soul. He is the mercy that can make me whole. I have failed more times than I can say. I have started over every single day, and some days lasted hours, some just moments, and God was in them, all the broken components of a recovery that is not a line, but a road that bends and climbs and still is mine. To walk with him who does not count the faults, but only counts the times still he calls. You did not make the chain, but you have worn the weight of every link that I have borne. You went into the darkest place of all to reach the man who cannot stop the fall. And you are not disgusted, you are not done. You are the Father running to the Son, who comes back broken one more time again. You are the mercy meeting every chain. I have failed and I will probably fail again, but you are in the failing, and the chain is loosening slowly, link by holy link. You are the God who meets me at the brink. You are the one who finds the addicted soul. You are the mercy working, making whole. Not in a moment, but in every day. You are the God who walks and does not walk away. Today I did not fall,
grace. Today I saw His mercy face to face. Tomorrow is not promised, but today the chain is old, and I have worn the chain. But there is one who walked into the darkest hole. Grief is not the end, though it feels like stone. Grief is not the sentence, though it feels like home. It has moved in, rearranged the rooms inside. It sits beside me where the living used to hide. But grief is not the final word. He is, and He has walked through every grief that is. He is the resurrection and the life. He is the morning after every night. I did not know that grief had such a weight, that it could sit upon the chest and wait for every quiet moment, every breath, to fill the space that used to hold before the death. I did not know that grief could be so loud in silence, in the ordinary cloud of every Tuesday, every cup of tea that used to be for two, and now for me. And I have not stopped crying in the church. I have not found the bottom of the search for any theology that holds the pain of someone gone who will not come again. Grief is not the end, though it feels like stone. Grief is not the sentence, though it feels like home. It has moved in, rearranged the rooms inside. It sits beside me where the living used to hide. But grief is not the final word. He is, and He has walked through every grief that is. He is the resurrection and the life. He is the morning after every night. He wept beside the tomb, He did not preach. He stood inside the grief within its reach. He let the tears of those who loved be real. He did not rush the mourning or appeal for quick recovery. He sat inside the death with those whose hearts had nearly died. And then He called, and the dead arose. He is the God who meets us and then shows. And I have not stopped asking where they are. I have not stopped reaching for the scar of their absence in the fabric of my days. I have not stopped, and I am told that's grace.
Grief is not the end, though it feels like stone. Grief is not the sentence, though it feels like home.
It has moved in, rearranged the rooms inside. It sits beside me where the living used to hide. But grief is not the final word. He is,
and he has walked through every grief that is. He is the resurrection and the life. He is the morning after every night. Grief is changing slowly, not away, but into something I can carry through the day. It is becoming part of who I am, a love that has no place to go and can only turn to memory and prayer, and to the God who holds them over there, in the place where grief has no more say, in the country of the ever-endless day. You collected every tear into your hand. You know the name of every grain of sand that has fallen through the fingers of the ones who stood at graves and lost their daughters' sons. And you have promised ancients, and it stands, that you will wipe the tears with your own hands, that death is not the final conversation, that grief will end inside the resurrection. Grief is not the end, you are the end. You are the beginning and the bend in the road where sorrow finally gives way to the reunion of the endless day. Grief is not the sentence, love outlasts even the grave, even the shadow casts its longest dark. He is the resurrection, he is the morning, he is the direction home. I will see them,
I believe it.
I will see.
In the morning that is coming they will be
there where grief has never found a door, and I will hold what I have ached for evermore.
Prodigal returns again to you. He has walked this road before, and you knew that he would fall and find the far country and walk back broken to your mercy. This is not the first time, and I know the shame of needing grace again to go back to where I started, back to your door. The prodigal returns and you run once more. I made the vow, I meant it when I did. I held it for a season, then I slid back to the familiar and the old, back to what I knew before I was bold enough to say I left it all behind. I said it and I meant it at the time, but here I am again upon the road, the familiar weight, the same familiar load. And the worst of it is not the fall itself, it is the face I wore upon the shelf of the face of someone free.
That wasn't me. The prodigal returns again to you.
He has walked this road before, and you knew
That he would fall
and find the far country
and walk back broken to your mercy.
This is not the first time, and I know the shame of needing grace.
Again to go
Back to where I started,
back to your door.
the prodigal returns, and you
Run once more.
He does not keep a record of the times. He does not meet the sun with cataloged crimes. He does not say you promised and you failed. He runs before the speech can be exhaled. He is the father of the recurring sun, the God of second, third, and endless one more chance, the God whose mercy is not thin. He is the welcome to the coming in.
And the best of it beyond all reasoning
Is that his arms are open, seasoning every return with the same unearned grace, the same robe and the same,
his face. The prodigal returns again to you.
He has walked this road before, and you knew
That he would fall
and find the far country
and walk back broken to your mercy. This is not the first time, and I know
the shame of needing grace.
again to go
Back to where I started,
back to your door.
the prodigal returns, and you
Run once more.
I have memorized the speech 100 times. I have practiced the contrition and the lines of the returning, and each time I've come, he has stopped the speech before I'm done. With his embrace he interrupts my shame. He replaces my confession with my name. He calls for celebration, not for penance. He turns my guilt into his grace. Attendance, you are not tired of me, though I am tired of the cycle of the falling and the mired return. But you are patient, you are long in mercy, and your welcome is a song that plays the same the 100th time as first, that meets the shame of thirst with ending thirst. You are the father of the one who keeps coming back, and you never sleep. The prodigal returns, and still you run before the speech, before the thing is done. The robe is out, the ring is in your hand. The father runs across the ancient land. This is not the last time you and I both know. I will wander and I'll find the far country and go back to where your mercy meets the road. The prodigal returns, and you still bear the load.
I am the prodigal and I am yours.
I am the one who keeps returning to your shores. Not because I'm strong, but because you run, and in the running I am always son. forgive? Who held the wound as long as I would live? Who kept the record polished close and clear, and fed it every morning, every year? But unforgiveness is a prison made for two, and I have been inside it, holding you inside it with me. Neither one is free. The man who could not forgive was only me. You did what you did, and it was real. The damage is not something I can feel my way around, or minimize, or name. As smaller than it was, the wound, the shame. I do not write it small to let you go. I only write it true, because I know that carrying it has cost me more than you. It changed the way I see, the way I move, through every room, through every open door. It made me someone I had not been before. Someone smaller, harder, clenched and cold. Someone aged by bitterness, not old. And I have prayed to God to take the stone, the heavy unforgiveness all alone from my chest. But it would not move until I understood what I must choose. I am the man who could not forgive, who held the wound as long as I would live, who kept the record polished close and clear, and fed it every morning, every year. But unforgiveness is a prison made for two, and I have been inside it, holding you inside it with me. Neither one is free. The man who could not forgive was only me. He forgave from the wood in the worst of pain. He asked the Father not to hold the blame on the ones who drove the iron through his hands. He forgave before they'd made demands of themselves, before the guilt had landed. He forgave the ones who left him stranded on the hill. And if he could forgive from there, then what is it exactly that I bear that is beyond the reach of what he paid the price for, and the mercy that he made? Wide enough for every wound and wrong, wide enough even for the one I've held so long. And I have prayed to God to give me grace to look the unforgiveness in the face, and choose not for your sake, but for my own, to put the record down and walk back home. I am the man who could not forgive, who held the wound as long as I would live, who kept the record polished close and clear, and fed it every morning, every year. But unforgiveness is a prison made for two, and I have been inside it, holding you inside it with me. Neither one is free. The man who could not forgive was only me. Because the wound was small, I do not forgive because it did not cost. I forgive because the holding cost me more than anything I'd lose by opening the door. Forgiveness is not saying it was right. It is not peace, not yet, not overnight. It is a choice repeated in the gray of every morning, choosing to not stay inside the prison of what cannot change. Forgiveness is the key, however strange it feels to use it on a door I hate. Forgiveness even now is never late. You forgave me and the list was long. You forgave me every right and every wrong I had committed against your holy name, and you released me without holding blame. How then can I stand before your grace and hold another man inside this place of unforgiveness, when you paid the cost to free me from the very thing I'd lost myself to? Lord, I choose today to open what I held and walk away from the prison I have built around my pain. I choose forgiveness in your name. I was the man who could not forgive, but I am learning daily how to live with open hands, records no more kept, with wounds acknowledged, mourned, and finally wept. Forgiveness does not come in one great flood. It comes the way that healing always does, slowly and with grace, and not alone. The man who could not forgive is walking home. I lay the record down upon the stone. I walk out of the prison and toward home. I am not yet